As night descended upon the forbidden zoo, the moon cast an eerie glow upon the old, rusted gate. The gate stood as a sentinel of time, weathered and worn, its surface marred by the ravages of time and neglect. Rust had consumed its once sturdy frame, leaving only a skeletal outline against the darkness. A cold wind whispered through the air, causing the gate to sway slightly, emitting a low, groaning sound. It was as if the gate itself was alive, its metallic voice echoing through the stillness of the night. The moonlight, filtered through the branches of nearby trees, painted strange patterns on the ground, adding to the ominous atmosphere. The air was thick with the scent of decay and abandonment, a palpable sense of foreboding hanging over the entrance. The gate, once a portal to wonder and excitement, now seemed to beckon with a sinister allure, promising horrors beyond imagination to those who dared to enter. As I pushed open the gate, a sense of dread washed over me. The hinges creaked in protest, the sound echoing through the empty streets. Stepping through the threshold, I felt as if I was crossing into another world, a world where nightmares lurked in the shadows and the unknown awaited at every turn. Inside the forbidden zoo, the animal shelters stood as silent monuments to a bygone era. Once bustling with life, they now lay abandoned and decrepit, their once vibrant colors faded to a ghostly gray. The cages, once home to exotic creatures from around the world, now stood empty, their bars a grim reminder of the captivity they once imposed. Dust coated everything, thick and undisturbed, giving the shelters an air of ancient abandonment. Cobwebs hung from the corners, their delicate threads swaying gently in the faint breeze. The air was stale and musty, the scent of decay mingling with the faint odor of animal musk. As I wandered through the shelters, the silence was deafening. There were no sounds of animals, no rustling of leaves, only the echo of my footsteps on the concrete floor. The shadows seemed to dance and shift, taking on eerie shapes and forms that seemed to watch me with unseen eyes. Occasionally, a gust of wind would send a door swinging on its hinges, the loud creaking sound breaking the silence like a gunshot. Each noise sent a shiver down my spine, as if the very walls were alive with some unseen malevolence. Despite the emptiness, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a chill ran down my spine. I quickened my pace, eager to leave the haunted shelters behind me and explore the rest of the zoo. The performance arena of the Forbidden Zoo was a place of faded grandeur and forgotten dreams. Rows of seats, once filled with eager spectators, now lay empty and covered in a thick layer of dust. The stage, once alive with the vibrant energy of performers, now stood silent and still, a shadow of its former self. As I stepped onto the stage, the floorboards creaked beneath my feet, protesting the intrusion. The air was thick with the smell of decay, a musty odor that seemed to seep from every pore of the arena. The only light came from the moon, filtering through the cracked windows and casting long, eerie shadows across the stage. Suddenly, the lights flickered to life, casting a harsh glare that seemed to illuminate every corner of the arena. I turned, expecting to see the source of the light, but there was nothing there. Instead, the stage was filled with ghostly figures, their movements jerky and unnatural, as if they were marionettes being controlled by some unseen puppeteer. The figures danced and twirled, their movements out of sync with the music that filled the arena. The air was filled with a cacophony of discordant sounds, the ghostly music mingling with the creaking of the floorboards and the rustling of the curtains. I watched in horror as the figures drew closer, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of pain and anguish. I could hear their voices now, a chorus of whispers that seemed to echo inside my head. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I was trapped in a nightmare, a prisoner of the haunted performance arena. Deep within the Forbidden Zoo lay the remnants of an old orphanage, a place long forgotten by time. The building stood as a testament to neglect, its walls covered in graffiti and its windows boarded up. Weeds had overtaken the yard, their tendrils creeping up the sides of the building like grasping fingers. As I entered the orphanage, a wave of musty air washed over me, thick with the scent of decay and abandonment. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, the sound echoing through the empty halls. The walls were covered in faded wallpaper, peeling and curling at the edges, revealing the bare plaster beneath. I wandered through the empty rooms, each one more desolate than the last. The furniture lay overturned and broken, the remnants of a life long gone. In one room, I found a child's doll, its porcelain face cracked and its glass eyes staring blankly ahead. It sent a shiver down my spine, a silent reminder of the lives that had once inhabited this place. As I made my way down the hallway, the sound of crying caught my ears. It was a soft, mournful sound, the sound of a child in distress. I followed the sound to a small room at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, I found myself in a nursery, its walls lined with cribs. The room was empty, save for one crib in the corner. As I approached, the crying grew louder, more desperate. Peering into the crib, I saw a baby, its face contorted in anguish. It reached out to me, its tiny hand grasping for comfort. But as I reached out to touch it, the baby vanished, leaving behind only the sound of its cries echoing through the empty room. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. The orphanage seemed to close in around me, its walls pressing in from all sides. I turned and ran, desperate to escape the haunted halls of the lost orphanage. As night deepened, a suffocating darkness settled over the forbidden zoo, shrouding everything in an impenetrable blackness. The air grew thick and heavy, pressing down on me like a weight. The once familiar paths now seemed twisted and distorted, leading me in circles as if mocking my attempts to escape. I stumbled through the darkness, my hands outstretched to feel my way forward. Shadows danced and flickered at the edges of my vision, playing tricks on my mind. I could hear whispers in the darkness, faint and indistinct, as if the very air was alive with unseen voices. Suddenly, a light appeared in the distance, a small, flickering flame that seemed to beckon me forward. I followed it, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. As I drew closer, I saw that the flame was coming from a lantern, held aloft by a figure cloaked in shadows. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice echoing through the darkness. The figure said nothing, only beckoned for me to follow. I hesitated, unsure of whether to trust this mysterious stranger. But something in their demeanor compelled me to follow, to unravel the mysteries of the forbidden zoo. As I followed the figure, the darkness seemed to lift, revealing a hidden world that lay beneath the surface of the zoo. I saw creatures that should not exist, twisted and deformed, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. I saw landscapes that defied logic and reason, shifting and changing before my eyes. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the darkness lifted, and I found myself standing at the edge of the forbidden zoo, the first light of dawn breaking on the horizon. I turned back to look at the zoo, but it was no longer there. In its place stood an empty field, as if the zoo had never existed at all. I stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of what I had seen. But in the end, there were no answers, only more questions. The forbidden zoo remained a mystery, its secrets buried beneath the shifting sands of time.